Apologies for the delay. We are live with another ICE for Innovation live session that we have. Today, we are going to talk a very exciting topic. We're going to talk about the ability to talk and having professional conversations at the workplace. We are joined with Mr. Hashim Noman, who is a senior ACCA member as well. He has many number of years of experience working in a professional domain. Currently, he's a manager at Jazz. So we would just be learning from him as to what is the art of conversation. Assalamu alaikum, Hashim. How are you?
Walaikum salam. I'm very well. Once again, thank you for having me. And I think just for the audience, technical difficulties are a part of life post COVID, so it's completely fine. That with great technology comes great responsibility as well. But we are where we are, and I think the topic itself appeals to me a lot. Is because at the end of the day, whatever comes down, whether it's the workplace, whether it's outside of your workplace, the ability to talk and have a conversation where you not just talk but also listen to the other person, receptive of their views. I think that's very important. So a great topic, and again, like I mentioned before, when we were studying back in 2007, 2008, we did not have access to such resources. So it's a very great thing for students and aspirant workplace people who want to just start off their career or in the middle of their careers, and they feel that they need to learn more. And again, they refer to them as soft skills these days. And I think all the interviews that I've done and all the interviews that I've been a part of always focus on how can you talk to me, because everyone knows what 1 plus 1 is, but can you really communicate it in a way that no one else does? So I think we're going to walk through those pointers when you display the PowerPoint presentation, and we go step by step. And once again, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yes, no, the presentation is displayed. I think the admin needs to add the presentation to the stream so that all the audience who are joining us can also look at it. Hashim, you mentioned about, talking as a one-way communication and then having conversations. So, जो conversations करनी होती है, especially at the workplace for somebody who's a young professional who's starting off, we do know that every organization has their own set of ethos, their values, something that they display in not only their own communication but also communicating when they're communicating as part of the team. We do know that a lot of the conversations that now the skill set at least that people are looking for in individuals and professionals is that their ability to work well in teams. So we do have the presentation in front of us, and I do know for a fact that you have shared a couple of pointers as well. So let us look at the first one. The first one that we see here, which you have rightly mentioned, is that have your personality figured out. Can you first elaborate, how does a person realize or understand what their own personality is like?
Okay, so stemming from the way you're raised and where you went to school and other things that affect, so your environment itself, um, um, you kind of mold yourself, and you evolve over time. By the time you reach to the workplace, it's very important that you know exactly what you bring to the table. Because like I mentioned to everyone that I speak to about this topic, I always give examples of two things: a band in music and a football team. Why? Because at the end of the day, everyone has a different skill set and everyone brings something very unique to the table. So you can't be Cristiano Ronaldo, but you can't win only by Cristiano Ronaldo, if you know what I mean. Because you need to know what you bring. And that's what conversation is. When you're in a board meeting or when you're presenting something, which part of the presentation do you take up? Which section do you want to do the introduction? Do you want to be the one who puts in a joke or two to kind of like uh, kosher the audience, so to speak? You really need to know how to do that, because if you don't do that, you'll always be afraid of speaking up, which is one of the points that comes later. Is unless and until you know thyself, you can't really know what to bring to the table. And that's why I put was first is know yourself, because if you don't know yourself, no one knows you as well.
So do you suggest then having a shot at being different? You are also giving us examples of people who are playing as part of a team. So if I take the example, I'm not a football avid fan, but if I take an example of a cricket match, then a person who's coming in as an opener, and then you're coming middle order. So do you suggest, or do you recommend young professionals take different strides and see what they're more comfortable with?
Yes, definitely, because any sort of team sport teaches you this. You can be an opener, you can come one down, you can be in the middle order, you can be at the end. Whatever makes the team win at the end of the day, right? So, what can you bring? Maybe you're stuck at number one. You don't want to go as an opener. You're more middle order. Unless and until you discover that for yourself, you won't be able to convince the coach. Which is point number three. Again, make an effort to speak up. Say, I'm not very comfortable being an opener. I can contribute more to the team if I go middle order, and I can win matches. And that only comes if you know what you're talking about and you know yourself. And again, like, everyone can't be an opener, everyone can't be the international cricketer of the year, Babar Azam, for example. But you can be who you are and contribute equally to the team. Again, single people don't win matches, it's the team that wins. So you're
Yeah,
absolutely right on that.
yeah, excellent, excellent. I'm gonna just reflecting and just thinking through that when you're saying that make an effort to speak up. That essentially also means that in a lot of the team trainings that I do, we do make people realize what kind of personality set each person has. But then communication and conversation is something which is it's right there at the top of each personality set. There has to be, we've seen on and on again and again in organizations that the more you are communicative, the more you are taking good criticism, just taking criticism in a positive and a healthy way, that also helps people shine out. So making an effort to speak up, how important it is for your next point, to share your own stories. Is it something that people look forward to, and then learn from them?
Yeah. So again, there's a lot of different personality types in the world. You can be an introvert, you can be an extrovert. You're more comfortable writing something to someone as opposed to picking up the phone. And if I look at myself when I started off back in 2008, I was more comfortable typing an email rather than calling because I was afraid, what the other person would probably say, because I was a management trainee and I was talking to people who were managers in software development, for example. But again, it just comes with time. You don't hit one and you don't kill one, hit two birds with one stone. It doesn't work that way. Maybe for some people it does, but it's a constant evolutionary process. And then when you go, like, let's say mid-tier in your career, you realize that if you don't speak up, you're losing out on a lot. When someone presents something and they say any questions and you say none, and you're given an assignment right after, then you're basically doing this to yourself. So it's important that you actually jot down everything. If you're not comfortable speaking in the room, just take the presenter on the side and say, I just need to ask you a couple of things. If you're comfortable that way, that's perfectly fine. But not speaking is a cardinal sin when it comes to the corporate environment, because then they'll say you don't speak up, you don't ask for it, so we don't give it. It works for assignments, works for bonuses, works for increments, you name it, it works everywhere. So it's very important that you can actually bring yourself to the table and say something that you mean. And I've seen people go from being absolute introverts to the best of the presenters only with a little confidence and only with a little push from their managers.
I really like that you're sharing your own stories, and I do recall that one instance from 2009, where we sat down together. You and I sat down together, and we were joined by a pool of young professionals like yourselves, and the first training that we were giving was on leadership. Or Uswakat leadership was more around, all right. It was more a topic that was always there, but it was something that wasn't a part of any curriculum, and that is what we wanted to instill. But the fact that you're saying share your own stories, how important it is, when you're speaking about bottom top down conversation. So a manager having a conversation with a subordinate, and then a subordinate having a conversation with a manager. how do you have conversations when we're talking about hierarchy? So how do you have conversations where you have to convey a message across to a counterpart, and both of you are at the same level, and both of you perhaps also have the same kind of experiences that you have shared? So how do we have such conversations in which people are at the same level, and then they have to share any kind of feedback, or just work together? How do you have conversations then?
Okay, so that's the trickiest part, and I think that that's something that you have to learn over time. Is because at the end of the day, if you're talking to your peer and you're right and they're wrong, or vice versa, so then the ability, like I mentioned at the start, you have to have the patience to listen to the other person, and you need to talk with respect. Everyone in this world wants respect. Treat someone nicely, they'll always treat you nicely. It'll take 10 days for that person to come around from his anger, but he'll be fine, or he or she will be fine. So it's important that they see you as a human being before then appear, because at the end of the day, there's competition everywhere. You can't go away with it. But if you have respect, you give respect, you get respect, you listen, and then you speak rather than you talk. So since we're at the topic, share your own stories. I've had a couple of sessions where people have started screaming in meeting rooms in previous organizations, and the only thing that I tell them is, you speaking loudly or me speaking low won't really change the fact that we are where we are. So let's just be adults and professionals and speak like gentlemen. And that's all it takes. I'm not raising my voice, I'm just talking the way I talk. But it's important for the other person to realize that as well. And that's a more negative case. A positive case, maybe if you treat someone with respect, they're like, oh, he really means what he's saying, so maybe let's give him a chance and listen. So we try it out. And I think things have changed, things have evolved. Corporate culture has evolved over time, where more people are more receptive now, so the structures are more flatter. So we're at a lot of times we're at the same level as other people. So what sets you apart is the fact, you speak up again, do you have a personality, who are you? So it all stems down to how you build your brand per se, and that's a very important topic as well. And you talk and you give respect, and I think to answer your question, Noor, I think it's respect. You give respect, you get
Yeah,
respect.
yeah, and I guess with respect also, because it's something which is mutually, I would say that it's mutually linked. It's just linked together, and like you're saying that it's a two-way street as well. I'm just bringing you back to another point, which is our next point on the screen as well, which you had mentioned, is that ask a lot of follow-up questions. So we've seen in teams a lot that where there are tasks that are working on a supply chain model. One person has to deliver, the other person has to do some other chunk of that work. A lot of time we have this kind of like a rift with this, like kind of like an ego war. We've seen, I'm sure you have seen in your experience, I've seen it happen many times, that just the fact that, what if we ask somebody a question, and what if that person thinks that I'm not smart enough? Is it something which is really hard to come over? Because you just mentioned that asking questions is like a very important thing. It just shows the other person also that you're respecting their thought process. What do you think? How do you overcome that कि यार अगर मैंने इससे सवाल पूछ लिया तो ये समझेगा कि I'm not smart enough?
I think इसमें बहुत सारा contribution है fear of the unknown. Again, I'm at that stage in my career and life where I can actually advise other people, and you won't know how the other person reacts if you don't ask. And that's as simple as that. क्योंकि होता है, you're absolutely right. You are afraid कि मैंने पूछ लिया तो ये कहेगा यार ये तो ACC करके आया, तो he doesn't know what debit and credit is, for example. And that's a very basic tenet of accountancy. But it really doesn't matter anymore. I mean, the other person is receptive. Again, you mentioned there's different people, different strokes for different folks, and that's what I keep saying. कि अगर आप सवाल नहीं पूछेंगे तो आपको कैसे पता लगेगा कि जवाब क्या था? You know, uh, I think if you take the first step, the other person takes the second step as well. But if you don't take the first step, you will never know. So again, a philosophical concept called Schrodinger's cat. If you don't open the box, you won't know if I don't want to say it out loud because I love cats, but that's the theory, is that you won't find out the outcome of this particular box if you don't open the box. So again, follow-up questions. For example, you've been given a task, unless you're absolutely sure what you need to do, don't start, because you may spend 25 or 30 days doing a task that could have been done in one day if you just listen properly. कि करना ये था और मैंने कर ये दिया. So I've created a monster, but I all had to do was just make a simple Excel sheet, for example. So yes.
And I guess what you're also saying is, Hashim, and I completely agree with you, that it is when you are part of a organization, and when you're also paving your way into the organization. I think one of the trickiest questions that interviewers have, and I'm sure you interview tons of professionals as well. Every time the interviewer asks, "Do you have any questions?" That's a trick question, right? It's basically meant to also give the interviewee an opportunity to, just put up their side of the picture, their side of their thought process, how much research they have done on the organization, how much keenness are they showing to be a part of this particular organization. So this particular thing, do you also think that it also works in that way? Are we right to assume, or is my thought process right in this, that you should have a couple of questions even when it's a interview that you're going to?
Most definitely, I think it's really important, and you've highlighted it rightly. कि जब आप interview में होते हैं and the interview asks, and I ask someone, do you have any questions? What I'm looking for is not कि बंदा मुझे बताए कि यार आप A plus B क्या होता है, या how much revenue your company makes, etc. I'm more looking forward to whether this person was listening to the conversation. Again, an interview is also a conversation. So you're just trying to judge whether the other person, A, like you mentioned, is prepared enough, has done his fact finding, knows exactly what the company does. A fun fact, again, I'm sharing a story. Once we were taking an interview for a role that revolved around transport, which is a network related element, which is optical fibers. But the person interviewing thought it was logistics, as in transport services. And then that's because the other person did not do their research. So again, yes, when someone says, do you have any questions, whether you have stupid questions in your head, I'm not saying the question is stupid. No question is stupid. Just ask. I mean, just ask me what I had for food. I mean, in an interview, you probably look forward to someone who can you can talk to, right? So again, yes.
Yeah, and I guess you're rightly saying one important aspect, another important aspect that you also highlighted, that when you're trying to have like difficult conversations, and those difficult conversations could be, there's a performance evaluation. You have to fight for your annual appraisal, right? And these are conversations that we generally feel that like I would say 60-70% people in our side of the world would shy away. They wouldn't know that what value or what worth they are for the company, or maybe they're just hesitant to have that conversation, and they would negotiate less. How would you say, since you've put this now on the slide, so I'm putting you on the spot, how do you practice having these difficult conversations?
I think because there's a very strong theory going forward post COVID is called work-life balance, right? So if you practice this in your real life, you can pull it off at work and vice versa. Having those difficult conversations, there's always going to be difficult conversations, whether it's at work or whether it's at home. For example, you mentioned a performance appraisal. Again, a huge part of conversation and talking is knowing when to speak and knowing when to stay quiet. And that's an art you have to learn as well कि कब आपको नहीं कुछ बोलना, because again, I derive a lot of inspiration from music, and there's a very solid line from a Pearl Jam song, and it's called "Some words when spoken can't be taken back." So know when not to say something, but again, just practice with your friends, practice with your peers. If practice in front of the mirror, if you have a big presentation, there's no harm in doing that. In fact, there's a video game called The Sims, and charisma only goes up if you practice in front of the mirror, right? So you have to practice. I mean, practice makes perfect. And that's true and holds true for every profession, every workplace ethos, everything in personal life as well. Have a difficult conversation with your wife. Okay, I go to my wife and say, I want to buy this guitar, and it's a little out of our budget, but this, because X equals Y equals Z, you name it. And that happens in real life as well. So practicing to get your message across, because I'm at a stage where it's easy for me to get my message across. and it wasn't the same 15 years ago. As you've seen, the only thing I asked you in that leadership summit was, "No, will I get a certificate?" And that's the only thing I ask you. And right now, I probably ask you much difficult questions, is like, where is this going to take me in life, etc., etc. So yeah,
Absolutely.
practice makes perfect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also what you mentioned earlier, that doing your homework, just understanding and assessing that, whether you have your bullets done right. I think one of the most difficult things for me, Hashim, is that, every year at the end of the year, when I sit down and I have to update my resume. That's also kind of like a conversation that takes place between me and my vendor, in which I have to send my resume across to different clients, and I keep forgetting. Although the year, would have accumulated and assimilated a lot of different projects, but you tend to forget. So if you're taking your bullets right, I think having conversations, which reporting is, I think, one of the most important things that people should be doing, even if for themselves, or even on a very informal level as well. But if you're doing your reporting right, it could be a one pager, it could be five bullets, it could be a posted note. As long as you have something which you are reporting on, would really work. I want to also share an experience, and then we'll move on to the next bullet. Just recently, like 2 weeks ago, I had to do a team building exercise with an organization which had people from various different cultures. And it was at the beginning of the new year, where they're going into a new project with, fresh ideas. But having looked at these people who are from all across the world, coming, sitting in Pakistan, and then just working together as a big team, like 30, 40 people in a team. How important it is, in those circumstances, to have conversations which are also just, small talk, just not everything about work. So, can you share any experience? Do you have any such story?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of stories, and we probably go way over time if I start telling those stories. Is because I think small talk is not really कि यार बाहर बारिश हो रही है कि नहीं हो रही, and maybe it's that कि बारिश हो रही है नहीं हो रही, अच्छा गाड़ी पे ओले पड़ेंगे, मेरी गाड़ी में डेंट पड़ेगा, etc., etc. The other person needs to realize that you're also human and where they're coming from, because every person is a story. And unless and until you make the small talk over a cup of coffee or outside, just talk about football, find a common ground. And I think that's what you need to do with your peers, that's what you need to do with your leaders, that's what you need to do with other people in life. Find your common grounds, and that you'll only realize when you talk to them. So maybe I know a person, for example, one of my best friends these days, I worked with that person for 7 years. I did not know he liked Pink Floyd, and that's only when we went on a training together and I was putting on a Pink Floyd song and he said, "I love this band." I'm like, "Whoa, okay, cool." I wouldn't know that unless I talk to them. So I think it's important, like you mentioned, if you're in a room full of people coming from very different backgrounds, different thinking capacities, capabilities, etc., unless and until you can individually reach out to all of them, and that's on you. So that only comes with practice. So that comes to the previous bullet point, is unless and until you practice with your peers, you won't know what hits and what misses. So yes, it's super important. And I think if I am to keep it very light, making small talk and sharing memes online is my jam, and my teammates would vouch for that. To also watching. So a mid conversation shout out to my team.
No, excellent. I'm glad you have your team members joining. Awesome. That's really nice. But I'll add into that. I think just small talk just helps you in developing work breaks, relationships which have less dichotomy. They have less chances of chaos. You are understanding each other's personality types and just general moods as well. You have a working mother, you have a toddler that you have to take care of, and a school going child, and that mom is coming to the workplace. She might not want to speak to anyone for the first half an hour or so, or might just want to have the first 15 minutes of her day, just sipping on her black coffee and just taking the day in. And it just also gives you some non-verbal cues as well. I think one of the most important things in conversations, especially at the workplace, is also when you understand people's non-verbal cues. I was looking through a video, you mentioned memes, and it said something about passive aggressive conversations, reading too much into somebody else's conversation essay. So Hashim, how do you tackle any kind of like passive aggressive situation at the workplace over an email? Somebody wants to say something and it's written in caps and with too many exclamation marks. How do you overcome or oversee that conversation?
I think you've rightly mentioned, and I'm glad because I was coming to that, is because during COVID, again, everyone was working from home. You didn't really know what the other person looked like when he was writing that email, right? Maybe he was super excited, hence the exclamation marks. Maybe he was super angry. Again, dealing with these types of people, I think you have to set your boundaries, and you need to, communicate to the other person. Maybe, so if you share a joke with me and I do a reverse joke and you don't like it, that's not right, right? So have those boundaries in place on a work on the workplace, and that, just understand where the other person's coming from. I have a gazillion people who type all caps with italics and purple fonts, and I need to understand where they're coming from. They're essentially not bad people. It's just that they're super excited when they write emails. And there's other people who write emails as long as a thesis report, right? And you need to understand that they're super excited to write that. So just give them that space. I think give everyone their space, but set boundaries. And that's kind of like where I would kind of take this particular point, is just set your boundaries, but know when to be friends and know when not to be friends. Again, don't intervene too much, and don't ask other people personal questions. Everyone wants to have respect them. Like you mentioned, when they're having their black coffee in the morning and their hair is all ruffled, know that they had a really tough morning. Just support them, just get them a glass of water or something, so that's where it all ends. I mean, I think that's where conversation also comes into play.
Excellent. I know we are a little above time, but I would quickly want you to move on to your last point so that you can sum up the conversation for all of the people who are watching us.
Yeah, I think again, coming down to the cusp of it all, is everything is a learning experience in life. At the workplace, take everything as a learning opportunity. I go to someone senior and they snub me down and they send me out, and they really do take that as learning. Maybe that person isn't having a good day again, and then learn from them, speak to them. Again, an advice I'd give to every person watching, whether they're students or they're just starting off, just talk to people and know where they're coming from, and that's how you get where you want to get in life and on up the corporate ladder, is knowing how the other person does what they don't do. I think, again, take every conversation as a learning opportunity, because it will pay off sooner or later. It always pays off. Like my mentors always mention, hard work always pays off. Sometimes right away, sometimes in a year, sometimes in 2 years, but it always does. It always works out.
Yeah,
That's the
no,
way the
great.
world is settled. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think this is really good words of advice, Hashim. Thank you so much for taking out the time. Thank you for bearing with us because of the technical issues. But I think a lot that we have learned today in the 28 minutes that we were with you was all around, just respecting boundaries, respecting each other, respecting the respect at the workplace, and your colleagues, and understanding that people could be wrong, accepting your mistakes also, and just overall just making an effort to have a two-way communication, a two-way conversation, where you are listening, where you're also absorbing, and when you're also creating it as a learning experience. Hashim, thank you so much for taking out time
You're
and for being
welcome.
with us. We look forward to having more Eyes for Renovation sessions with you. Thank
Before,
you for your
sorry, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off. Noor. For the audience and whoever listens to this later, you have my LinkedIn in case anyone wants to reach out to learn anything about anything. Maybe I'm right at something, but I'd like to also learn from other people, and that's, so feel free to reach out whenever you have any issues, if you need advice making a PPT or talking to the management, etc. So this is right out, and it's free. So
Excellent. Thank you so much for being generous and for allowing people to connect and network with you, Hashim. If you're looking for Hashim on the LinkedIn, this is his name that's appearing on the screen. And you could look him up and feel free now that he's given you his blessings. Just feel free to connect with him. Thank you so much, everybody. Till we are back with another Rise for Innovation session, we'll see you soon, inshallah. Thank you. Take care. Thank you.